The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining our webinar today on CAF Funding Round 2. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box on the right. And without further ado, here is Troy Connolly for the first part of your presentation.
Great, thank you, Colin. And thank everybody on the webinar for joining today. I know your schedules are busy, and I appreciate you taking time to do this. We're going to talk today about the CAF Phase 2 Reverse Auction webinar. The CAF Phase 2 Reverse Auction gives local service providers an opportunity to gain subscribers and census blocks supporting by funding from the FCC. We are pleased to see a large audience in this webinar from all manner of service providers throughout the United States. We also did another one of these a month previously, and we had a large participation in that as well, which shows us that this reverse auction is of high interest to many service providers throughout the U.S. Colin, next slide. Our goal today is to offer an educational session to help you understand the CAF reverse auction process, as well as products and services that we believe can help you craft a winning bid. As the organizer of the webinar, we believe the cost profile and technical capabilities of fixed wireless broadband, both point-to-point and point-to-multipoint, can be a key component. This is proven in our past experience with the rural broadband experiment. Today we're going to provide some history on the CAF Phase 2 fund, the current status as best we know it, and the overview of the bid process, once again, as best we know it today. There's still some things up in the air that Ted's going to talk about. For those new to wireless, we'll introduce a resource for finding and acquiring vertical assets in your areas to help you build out a wireless network. And of course, we'll discuss Cambium products and how and where they can be used to develop a winning bid. All right, next, Colin. To fully understand where we are now, it helps to review the history of the Connect America Fund and how the requirements and the process has evolved. Way back in November of 2011, the FCC released the details of transition of the high-cost Universal Service Fund to the broadband-oriented Connect America Fund. In the first phase of the CAF process, the FCC offered $300 million to the price cap carriers. In that particular offering, bandwidth requirements were 4 meg down, 1 meg up, and importantly here, at a less than 100 milliseconds of latency, because the FCC views CAF as not only broadband, but ultimately being able to provide telephone service. The price cap carriers only accepted $115 million of the $300 million allocated. They had some issues with a lot of things. The price per subscriber subsidy was one, as well as a number of others, and they sent petition after petition to the FCC to try to get them to change that. A lot of the things that they had in CAF Phase 1. Growing frustrated with the progress and continued objections from the price cap service providers, the FCC initiated the Rural Broadband Experiment. The Rural Broadband Experiment came out in July of 2014. It offered $100 million budget to the Rural Broadband Experiments. This was the first attempt by the FCC to award fixed broadband network subsidies through a competitive bidding mechanism. And Ted will talk about this more at length, but we believe a lot of the lessons learned from the Rural Broadband Experiment and a lot of the processes that the FCC established with this is going to be utilized in the reverse bidding process. Through the Rural Broadband Experiment, the FCC received nearly 600 project bids to serve 76,000 census blocks. They picked 40 projects. Initial winners included wireless WISPs, local telephone companies, power companies, and cable companies. With the experience gained from the Rural Broadband Experiment, the FCC introduced CAF Phase 2. They were very pleased to see that through the Rural Broadband Experiment that there were other service providers willing to provide local broadband to these census blocks. So this experience drove a lot of the requirements in CAF Phase 2. CAF Phase 2, they offered to the service providers, the speeds increased here, the per subscriber funding amounts decreased, which was interesting, but once again, this was a lesson learned through the Rural Broadband Experiment. And there was also a condition placed on the next offering to the price cap carriers. They told, why don't we go ahead to the next slide? They told the price cap carriers that if you don't bid on the census blocks in your area on a per state basis, they were going to put them up for an award reverse auction process to carriers who would serve them. Once again, drawing from the experience of the Rural Broadband Experiment, that they found that carriers were lining up to be able to serve these local areas. And they, not surprisingly, the price cap carriers, fearing loss of their subscribers, signed up for a lot of the CAF Phase 2 funding at a level unseen in CAF Phase 1. With that said, there were still areas that they refused to serve and said, we don't want to do that. And now that's where we are, that for those census blocks that the price cap carriers refuse to serve, those are going to go up for reverse auction just like the FCC said they were. And that puts us here today where we stand in anticipation of that reverse auction. With that, I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Ted Osborne.
Thank you very much, Troy. Good to be with everybody. Good morning. I am very pleased to speak with you about the Connect America Fund. It's, I think, a very exciting program that will have a considerable impact in the marketplace. As Troy had indicated, there's funding across all of the United States at this point in time. A misnomer is that after the price caps accepted their territories, that there were only about 20 states remaining. However, with some adjustments here earlier in the year, we're now at a Phase 2 auction budget, if you will, of $2.15 billion over 10 years, or $215 million of subsidy available across the U.S. for a competitive bid. 6, please. Next slide, please. As far as our agenda today, of course, our purpose is to provide an education for the CAF opportunities under the auction, what you would want to do to consider in preparing for this auction, and how it might impact your business. As far as a background, I'll share with you just briefly my background and my experience with the Connect America Fund. We're going to take you through an executive briefing of the CAF proceeding as it's coming along at this point in time. And then we'll try to drill down with you on what are the elements of the auction, where is the subsidy available, what are the eligibility requirements for a bidder, what are the rules and bid qualifications, and some ideas on how to proceed going forward. Next slide, please. As far as my background, I became involved in the rural broadband business in 2002, having done some research to identify radio technology that could reach unserved markets rapidly and at an affordable cost. We were one of the very first users of the Cambium product line back in 2003 when I started Airwave Access. We merged that over the course of 5 years. We had built that up to a sizable business across the Colorado Front Range, and merged it with JAB Wireless, or Rise Broadband, as they're known. In 2008, I started to do consulting for various rural operators, And I went back to a client during the experiment and helped them with some bids that we put forward, about 10 bids. We won all 10 of those for just under $17 million of grant proceeds to be paid out over 10 years. And currently I work on strategy and corporate development advisory services specific to rural broadbands, local rural operators. Next slide, please. As Troy was talking, the price caps were provided, if you will, the first bite at the apple. Not all the commissioners agreed that, that this should be done in this fashion, but the price caps, the incumbents, if you will, were offered the full reserve amount. There was no bidding required, but the full reserve amount in their territory so long as a full commitment was made statewide. And a little over a year ago, the price caps made selections for about $1.7 billion of annual support, which is still a fraction of the universal service funds from which the Connect America Fund is funded. So it looked like everything had been spoken for. Next slide, please. Because this was the area in green where funding was committed by the incumbents, and services were committed at a 10.1 megabit level service, less than 100 milliseconds of latency. So at that point, if you'll go to the next slide, please, we'll see where various incumbents said, no, we're not making a commitment in some of our states, or in the case of Verizon, in all of our states, leaving at the time about 447,000 unfunded locations in rural America per the Connect America program, and $175 million in available funding. Next slide, please. As far as a breakdown of what those 20 states look like for the $175 million, this is how it looked, I think, up until we became more aware leading into the July timeframe of this year. We see that some states had significant reserve money available, and others more bleak had been spoken for by most of the incumbents. And next slide. So let's get into the auction, and I'm going to echo Colin and suggest that you type in your questions into the chat screen. There's a lot to this, and in the limited time that we have today, we can't adequately cover everything that's probably on your mind. So if you will enter your questions, we'll try to deal with them during the session, or we'll follow up with you with specific answers to your questions and share them with everybody. So on the auction, let's look at where subsidy is available, the eligibility, the rules and bid qualifications for you, and then how to proceed. Next slide, please. When we received notice earlier in the year that additional monies had been allocated in what's called the CAM 43 model, it was released August 10. They showed us, as you see depicted in gold, the areas that are eligible for funding. And it does include every state in the U.S. with the exception of Alaska. There's a proceeding that is taking place to give special recognition and consideration for the state of Alaska for purposes of the Phase 2 reverse auction. It will be in all the 48 contiguous U.S. states as well as Hawaii. And as mentioned, it's now $215 million a year for 10 years is the reserve price. And I want to make clear what that definition is on reserve price in a moment. Next slide, please. Taking the CAM 43 model, which listed 317,000 census blocks across all of these states, we recapitulate these numbers to show how much reserve funding is available in each state. And I'll leave this up just for a moment for you to take this in and see what it means for you and your business if you anticipate being a bidder, or if you're providing equipment and services to those who would be bidding relative to how much money might be flowing into the channel. I think this is a very important chart for us to look at. So what we're looking at is the reserve amount, the number of eligible locations for funding. That doesn't mean the number of total locations that might be within the census blocks, but just those that the FCC has deemed is eligible for funding. The annual reserve amount per location as an average is provided as well. And you can see there's considerable variation that has been determined through a series of algorithms and what the FCC deems might be the cost, the additional subsidy cost to serve these areas. Now let me define the reserve price for a moment, because there's some misunderstanding about that. In a reverse auction, one would bid a amount of money for a service area specific to a census block on average, and it cannot exceed the reserve price. That's the CAF. That's the budget that the FCC has to work with, and the successful bidder will be at some number at or less than that number in order to be the competitive winner in the auction. So if you look at the bottom of this chart, you'll note that there are about 1.5 million locations that are eligible for funding that the FCC would like to have providers step up to, and that the total amount of money, if you were to look at the reserve price necessary to serve these 1.5 million locations, would be nearly $1 billion. So in terms of a budget to reserve value, we have a coverage ratio of about 22%. Therefore, in a perfectly efficient market in this auction, the FCC would be greatly pleased if all the bidders bid exactly distinct blocks at 22% of the reserve price, and we would have, we would have higher degree of broadband availability across all of rural America. Of course, it's not going to be that efficient, and it's going to be, it's going to take a lot of preparation and some determination as to what's right for the bidders, and it's going to take a little bit of game theory in terms of putting something forward that, one, the FCC likes, and two, you're happy to win and feel that you can execute against, and we'll talk about those rules next. If we'll go to the next slide, please. So one of the key elements now that is available to us with a little bit of additional work is the visual mapping here done in Google Earth by taking the CAM 43 and showing, and here the example of the state of California, the census blocks that are eligible for funding. And in the Central Valley, for example, look at the southern Central Valley, you see this faint blue. It is filled with many thousands, tens of thousands of census blocks. And as you drill down, you'll see those distinctly, and you can take a look at the underlying metadata. This mapping will help you to determine what's available in your area of interest, where you might want to place a bid. In California, the reserve amount is $72 million, and that's for about 72,000. I think 76,000 locations is correct. Next slide, please. We're going to drill down just a little further. As I mentioned, the underlying metadata of a census block today is less descriptive than the one that we will be working with during the actual bid element. And so here what we have are the census block number, the number of eligible locations. Again, that's not the total locations in the census block, it's those that are eligible for funding, and the reserve price of $35,000 per year for 10 years, or $350,000 to serve that census block in the reserve. So let's go one more, please. One more, thank you. So now we can develop polygons around areas of interest, extract all of the underlying metadata quickly, and we find that in these two northeastern counties, Madoc and Layson, if I pronounce those correctly, I don't know those markets, we have annual support of $3 million, and applications of about 2,500, covering 690 census plots. So this might be a market area for a bid, for example, or it may be some some element that crosses political borders that's consistent with the network design that you'll want to put together in order to meet the performance criteria that we're going to talk about next. So if we'll go to the next slide, please. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware of what happened in the rural broadband experiment. There were some wins, there were some losses, there were some unexpected outcomes. There were people that put in a lot of time and effort and thought that they were going to be awarded funding. They were named a provisional winner, but it was an experiment, and as an experiment goes, you know, it didn't turn out the way that we had anticipated for a number of these bidders. And I was just disappointed personally because a lot of them were local rural providers who I have the strongest affinity for, having been a WISP. But let's take a look at what has changed now with this current auction that's upcoming. In the experiment, we were talking about a funding mechanism of $100 million. Now it's 2.15 billion. In the experiment, 3 years of audited financials were required. In the auction, it's 1 year of audited financials. There's a caveat to that, but without going into a lot of specific detail, it's 1 year of audited financials, and the financials can be provided after you are given notice that you are a provisional winner. So in terms of readiness, I would suggest that one that is not audited should, you know, prepare and have the relationships and put the general ledger forward, so that there's not a long incubation period to that process, because you'll have to meet that requirement along with some others before the funding is released. The letter of credit that needs to be covered, it needs to be discussed here. What that is a mechanism for the SEC to protect the public interest in providing the money to you that you have made commitments to serve certain levels of performance in your area of interest, and this letter of credit is money that can be pulled by the SEC should one fail to meet those requirements. And the letter of credit would be established by a bank to support you, and should the SEC determine that you have failed to meet the performance, they will provide notice to you with a 6-month rate to cure, as the rules are established per the report and order May 26th of this year. And so they will give you 6 months to cure. They don't want you to fail. They want you to win. They want you to meet your commitments. And if you fail to cure after 6 months, they have the right, and likely will, pull the funding that has been provided to you. However, that letter of credit amount will be reduced as the network is built, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about that in a moment. The experiment provided for 100 of the largest banks to support. The FCC recognizes the significant burden that places on local rural providers, and indeed the FCC, the Commission wants local rural providers to participate, and they feel very strongly about that. And so they have opened it up now to about 3,600 banks that are independently rated by WISE with a rating of B- or better. It also includes CoBank, which I think is important because they're a considerable partner in rural America on a number of fronts, and so they are also a resource for you. And I'll just give you an anecdotal quick story on that. I went to a client's bank. They've been doing business together for years. They're a very small regional bank. They work just maybe 500 square mile area. And we went to the owner and asked if he was WISE rated. He says, well, I don't know. But we looked into it, and indeed he was, because they're independently rated. They don't have to pay for that service. Many of the local rural banks will be participants and could be a valued partner to you. Next slide, please. So on the Phase 2 auction, we have some things that have not changed. One is, and this took a little work on the part of a number of associations, including the American Cable Association, the WISPO organization, and so forth, to make sure that the broadband and voice requirements could be met under technology agnostic design. So whether it's wireline, wireless, any combination of those two, there is an opportunity to play. And indeed, there's an opportunity for satellite to play as well. In the eligible telecommunications carrier status that is required to file with a state PUC, again, that will not have to be a requirement until after you've made provisional winner, and you will find the states to be very receptive. They are very aware of the program. They want to work with you and the FCC to become that, but I encourage you to understand what does that mean in terms of regulatory requirements at the state on reporting on voice services as a critical lifeline. There's also a requirement for a professional engineer to stamp the network designs that you are putting forward as your statement that you can meet the eligibility requirements, and that is done typically by an independent, but it has to be a professional engineer that looks it over. And I would suggest to you that if you're interested in participating, let's establish those relationships earlier rather than later, so that you're not unfocused on the most important element, and that is how you want to place your bid. There will be multiple speed tiers. It'll be a single round competition, and there will be bid credits associated with various and multiple performance tiers. Next slide, we'll get into that, and we'll be close to a wrap up here. So on the rules, the speed tiers are defined as a minimum performance of 10 megabit down, 1 megabit uplink. That is at peak usage periods that will be measured in some fashion that's not been defined yet. And there is a usage allowance relative to data caps of 150 gigabit level data usage. The baseline performance that will likely get a bid credit, and those credits have not been determined yet, would be 25/3. And above baseline is 100/20. I'm not going to argue that people need 20 megabit uplink. I'm not going to argue that everybody needs 100 downlink, but that is an above baseline performance tier that will likely have a couple of bid credits. And then there's the gigabit level service of 1 gig down and 500 megabit uplink. So you can expect all these to be bid in a single tier, and there will be some bidding credits associated with the higher level performance that you choose to bid. There's a latency requirement. This was necessary to make sure that it was clearly understood that the money should go to services that can meet all of the modern interactive applications, such as the one that we're having at this particular moment. But there is a high latency category where it's more 750 milliseconds of latency, which would be for friends in the satellite delivery business. Then there's the completion milestones that must be met, which is after the end of the third year, 40% of the network must be built. And as you see here, it must be fully completed by the end of the 6th year. And on the letter of credit, to the extent that you satisfy that in this timeline or an accelerated timeline, you will have a reduction of the letter of credit facility that's necessary to protect the FCC's position on the funding they provided to you. Next slide, please. So I'm often asked, how do you proceed? What do you do? When is this activity going to actually take place? I actually did ping just this morning a close colleague, Steve Coran, the Lerman Center regulatory attorney out of Washington, and asked what he thought would be the timeline. There are a number of procedural things, sorry for the non-technical word, but procedural activities that are taking place at the SEC now. The bid credits, for example. There is we are in a period right now following the May 26th report and order that provides petitioners to seek reconsideration. We are pretty deep into that process. There are some fun activities going on, but overall, my best estimate, and I could be wrong because we're not getting direct guidance from the Commission, is sometime in 2017. I would anticipate that the earliest would be Q2, and it could be toward the end of the year, and there's no promise on that. But should you keep CAF in mind, and should you potentially start to act upon it? I think in many cases the answer to that question is yes, because we have 90% of the rules established. We know where, on a preliminary basis, the funding is made available and how much the reserve is. And you can begin to assess the potential in any one market area and formulate a 10-year set of projections to see how the cash flow would model, assuming various kinds of inputs on the network build, on other costs that you have, so that you know where you would want to be in being a bidder. And then there are other elements that are taking place, and I strongly encourage you to spend time with your supply chain, speak with your Cambium team, and look at all the new products across the board with all manufacturers to know where the new products are able to fit in the market. What will be the actual propagation characteristics under different conditions? Understand that, look at the innovation and spectrum policy, and begin to develop your relationships for all of the support people that will be necessary to make you properly eligible for the bid. Troy has asked me to make myself available to, next slide please, to his customer base. And we are a team of, we're an assembly of multi-platform internet experts, wireline and wireless. We are experts at the executive level. We have professional engineers, lawyers, financial analysts. And we are providing a toolkit to do a very quick review on a custom basis of your market so that you know what the opportunity looks like, and to help you make a determination whether you should or should not be a participant, and perhaps some ideas on what to do given any decision that you might make. I think that the Connect America Fund will make a very large impact in rural broadband and change the landscape of service providers over the next short number of years. And with that, I thank you very much for your attentiveness and listening, and I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Troy.
Okay, thank you very much, Ted. These slides will be available to everybody if you want to contact Ted. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, Mr. Jeffrey Deal.
Thank you very much. You can roll into the next slide. Should be the first of the American Tower slides.
I think I already did. Is this not the right one?
Two more, please.
Oh.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Troy, for setting this up. This has been really beneficial for us, as well as I believe all the customers that I've interacted with after our last call. And I'll quickly, Cambium and American Tower have really been operating in the same space and operating with the same customers for years. And earlier this year, we had the opportunity to sit down and really figure out opportunities for us to team in this market and bring solutions to the table. So we're excited about where this is going, and I think in the near future you'll see some offerings coming out from American Tower and Cambium about assisting our customers to deploy quick, scalable networks. With that, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I've actually been with American Tower for 15 or just over 15 years now, and I've actually been focused on just wireless internet service providers over the last 2 years. So on a daily basis, all I interact with is ISPs, deploying networks, expanding their networks, dealing with capacity issues. So it's been a great learning experience for me, and what we've done as a company, and we'll speak to it a little bit, is try and assist our customers in building fast and offering fast and affordable solutions for them. Today we do business with almost 400 ISPs in the marketplace, and that's expanding on a daily basis. In today's slides, what I'll do is just talk a little bit about who we are and what our assets are, our capabilities. One thing that's significantly changed over the last year is our dedicated resources, some of our tools, and then our pricing options. So with that, you can roll into the next slide. Actually, you could skip one more, please. And this really just speaks to who we are, what we own domestically. I think if anybody has followed American Tower over the last couple of years, we've significantly changed of who we are and the assets we own. We're now a global company, and I think those are some of the benefits that to the relationships that both us and Cambium see. But domestically, we're basically over 65,000 or almost 65,000 towers. Our assets, 40,000 of those are actually towers. The majority of these towers are the ones that we do business with ISPs. But we also have over 15,000 rooftops in the U.S., and we're starting to see ISPs compete in the dense urban areas as well as the rural areas. And a lot of those assets on the rooftops we're able to utilize. We also have over 1,300 IDAS, which is in building venues such as football, basketball arenas, anywhere where there's dense urban areas where there's high population. And I think we all understand is the people's need to be connected is significant. And we can go to the next slide. Get the mic click. Okay, and you can go right into the next one as well. And what we'll talk about here is our 4WISP, really our program, and it's really dedicated to ISPs. And what we've done over the last couple of years since I've been involved in this segment is really just trying to better understand our customers, and not only that, understanding our assets. So when we're offering assets and cellular towers and rooftops, understand that which ones are best a possible solution for our customers. And what we've done is looked at some of our assets. So 22,000 of our 40,000 towers are outside the top 100 BTAs and are typically where our rural ISPs are operating. So they're taller towers, they're things that can be utilized quickly to deploy networks, especially when trying to build out in these identified CAF markets. 79% of those 22,000 towers exceed 150 feet in height, which is really a benefit because actually we were just at WISPAPalooza a week and a half ago, and a lot of feedback we hear from our customers is the great capabilities that the equipment, specifically Cambium, has today is the capacity, ability to serve more customers, which now a lot of our customers, what they're saying is with the equipment that's available today, they can get higher, propagate a larger footprint, and obviously have service to additional customers, and which obviously there's additional revenue sources as well. So getting higher, having the equipment that allows you to have a larger footprint, obviously is a financially a better position for your business. The next page, please. And this goes into, this slide actually talks about our dedicated support, and I think this is where we really changed who we are and how we approach our segment customers, our ISPs. And this is where we truly created over the last year a team that's dedicated specifically to ISPs. I think we had a sales team in the past that was kind of focused on the national carriers as well as the smaller regional and rural players. But what we've done over the last year is created a segment-specific sales team, first of all, so that we've created as one specific person in each of our 5 areas that's simply dedicated to dealing with ISPs and utilities and government accounts. So they better understand what you're trying to do today and how you're trying to deploy those networks. We have a leasing operations team, so we have a dedicated PM that specifically handles ISP customers. So that project manager who's processing those applications and interacting with our customers is solely dedicated to ISPs. We have in-house engineering. We have field operations technicians as well. We have actually almost 300 of them across the U.S. that are in the market, dedicated to specific sites so they understand our assets. So what we do now today, which is a little bit different from a couple of years past, is we understand the potential hiccups and barriers to entry on some of our sites where there's cost prohibitive scenarios. So we're filtering those sites out so that when we're having discussions with our customers, we're identifying the clean, fast, easy sites to co-locate on, which has been a true benefit to not only our customers but to ourselves as well. And then we have a 24/7 NOC. It's actually an ATC-operated NOC where we own, maintain, and operate our sites and have quick access. So if there's anything that you need, there's a simple single number for you to call into to grab assistance. And then from my role, it's just really interacting with our customers from a regional and local level to really figure out what we can do to assist you to build quick, fast networks. You can go into the next page. And this will just talk real quickly about some of the tools that we have. And I know Cambium has some great tools in Link Planner. This is, I would say, similar to along those lines, which is our on-air access. And everyone has access to this. All you need to do is submit it through American Tower, and you get it on there, like a user email address and a password, and you can gain access to this. So it's real simple and easy. If you go into our website, you can grab or jump into this real easy. You can go to the next page. What I'll talk about is just some easy tools, and this is where we've seen some customers really take advantage of the tools that we have. And once you get into it, the on-air access, you can see up on the kind of the middle of the screen, it says Site Locator on the middle left. And what this really does is give you a Google-style map of all of our assets throughout the U.S. You can zoom in here, you can look by address, you can look by lat and long, you can look by counties, and really dive into if there's a specific county that you're interested in and potentially deploying to secure CAF funds, you can get in there as well. So before you're even interacting with anybody from American Tower side, you can actually have a good snapshot of how many towers do we have in your market. Is it worth reaching out to us? If it is, you might already know 6 or 7 or 3 towers that you're interested in. So it's a quicker, easier conversation, but this gives you the tools and the resources to be much more knowledgeable about our sites prior to engaging a conversation with one of our local sales folks. You can go into the next page. And what we do in-house, and we talked about the dedicated resources, is we have a GIS and engineering team specifically dedicated to our segment ISP customers. And we did this real quick, and it's just by no other means in Oklahoma, we just picked the state. But what we did is we worked with our team, and we said, hey, let's identify the available areas or eligible areas, and let's overlay our sites on those areas. So if a customer said, hey, I'm interested in Oklahoma or California or any other state, we could give you a quick snapshot by overlaying our towers to see what type of coverage could be supplied by utilizing our assets. And these are the types of things, if any customer wants to get this type of information, they can reach out to myself or anyone at American Tower. And these are the things that we're delivering to our customers today at no cost. We can go into the next page. And this really get into network specifics and pricing considerations, because as I interact with customers, it's the first question out of everybody's mouth is, okay, what does it cost me? What's my rent for these sites? And I'll talk a little bit about how we look at that. So we can go into the next page. So this really talks to the site specifics and how we look at sites when we're ready to price them from a lease rate. And this, once again, just gives our customers a little more education about how we think about their business, because we continue to try and research the business at hand, but it's also beneficial when you kind of understand where we're coming from, so that we can get to the most desirable rate plan, so that it be financially acceptable to you as well. And what we're really looking at is, where do you want to be on the tower? Obviously, some of these sites in the rural markets might be 300-400 feet tall, some might be 100 feet tall, and to us it's just vertical real estate. So what we try and do when we've created these width-specific plans is get folks to utilize a single rad center. So your APs and your microwave dishes are all going to be at the same height. Once again, it just limits the amount of space. And obviously ISPs are using significantly less space than the large national carriers. So we take that into account as well, and that's where we get into some of these more aggressive rate plans, because we understand the equipment is smaller. But we're going to look at the number of APs, maybe the number of ODUs, using an Omni, or using just panels, the weight of the remote radio head. So we're looking at all of that as far as how specifically to gauge and understand the price, and the size of your backhaul dishes. We have some customers that are in rural markets that they need that they want to use licensed shots, and they're obviously further and longer shots, so they want to use a 4-foot dish. We have some folks that are using a 1-foot flat panel. So it's significantly different from market to market. But what we're really trying to understand is how many APs, how many microwave dishes. That's the real simplest form to put it in, and that you're using a single rad center. And the last piece is the amount of space needed in the compound. And there's a lot of different scenarios in our sites where, in this actual photo, it shows there's some shelters on site. Sometimes we have rights to those shelters. Sometimes those shelters belong to the carriers and we don't have access to them. If we do, we could potentially provide you utilities. If we don't, obviously you'd have to either plug into the existing multi-gang meter bank and or bring in your own power. And those are all things that we scrub for our customers as well. So if a customer says, hey, we're interested in these 3 sites, we immediately scrub those sites to make sure we're giving a clean offer back to you so that you can make a quick decision. Once again, we understand that there's barriers to deploying these networks, and if there's a cost there that's a barrier, we want to identify it immediately. Next page, please. And then here I'm just going to talk briefly about our pricing, and we can slide into the next page. But it's 2 years ago we started with these pricing plans, and they're all really based on customer feedback. And we can roll into the next page. And what we've done is we created these, but over the last year and a half, really these start as the baseline. And then we've evolved it to whatever makes sense for our customers. There's a freedom rate, which we talked about, because we're getting feedback from customers that they're seeing immediate capacity needs, so that day one maybe they identified they wanted 3 or 4 APs, but they were seeing that within 6 or 8 months they needed 6 APs. So what we're doing is trying to give them an easier ability to have reserved space for equipment that they might need in the future. So we lease all of it day one, and then as you needed to grow, you just had rights to that equipment. And then a stepped rate, what this was is really just an understanding of the ISP business, which is typically when you deploy, you don't have customers day one. So what we did is incrementally increase the rent over the first couple of years of the lease, so that it started on the lower end while you're trying to secure and grow your business. And then over the years, it's slowly incremented so that it got basically back to the negotiated lease rate. So just an understanding, again, of what this space is about, how your business works, and us crafting a financial offering to assist. And then the last one is a limited pop rate. When we look at sites, we actually have all the household data, so we're trying to help our customers make a good financial decision. So we kind of understand the business of the average revenue per customer. We understand the penetration rate of our customers from like the first couple of years. So when there's a limited population within the house, within that site, we typically get a little more aggressive on that, on the pricing plan. And we might actually do a 12-month agreement, right, rather than a 5-year, 3 or 5-year deal, so that within a year, if demonstrates that it just isn't generating the revenue we needed, then okay, let's just agree that it didn't work and we can walk away. So once again, they're all just different plans that we are creating for our customers to better understand their business, better provide solutions, and the biggest thing is just options. I think that's the greatest benefit from not only American Tower and Cambium, but we're just giving options that for solutions for our customers. And then you go to the next page. And if there's any questions, feel free to give me a call. Once again, I oversee this business nationally. I'm responsible for the revenue lines here. So anything that you need, or just questions or comments, or if you're an existing customer and you have questions about how to get more involved in some of these plans, or a prospective customer and you just are interested in what we can do to support you, please let me know. Shoot me an email, give me a phone call, and I would gladly assist. And once again, thank you again for your time, and thank you, Troy.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, I want to be respectful of time. We set this up for an hour. We've run a little bit behind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about Cambium products. I'll probably skip through this pretty quick. Keep in mind that we're always available to answer any questions and provide more detail on any of the products that you've seen today. Next slide. So the one thing that you've heard today revolves around pricing associated with your bid. You know, how much is it going to cost you to let this out? Some of the customers here will have plans in some of these areas. Some will need their plans. But either way, for all networks, there are basically three areas of building the network. One is long haul, middle mile, or last mile access. Cambium has a product for each one of these. Colin, next, please. Colin, we're going to skip through pretty fast. Cambium has a full suite of point-to-point and point-to-multi-point products for either long-haul, middle mile, or last-mile access, and either unlicensed or licensed frequencies. We have a device, we have a wireless manager we call CNMic that can pull it all together so you can look at your network and know how it's operating at any given time. Next, please. We'll talk a little bit about our 820 or PTP 820 radio. That's our licensed radio, basically used for long haul. An important point about this radio is a 2 gig radio, where it's a dual core radio that can transport up to almost 2 gig, 2048 QAM. Most importantly, it is 2 cores in one package. Jeff talked about the price associated with leasing a tower. If you're going to do that, and how size is critically important, that's where the 820 shines. Next slide, Colin. The 820, the 820C that we're talking about here, that's 2 1 gig cores in one box. So it is incredibly small. So we're trying to minimize the cost of what you would have to lease if you're going to lease a tower. Next slide. We have multiple options for you. Once again, with cost in mind, we have an 820S, which is a 1 gig radio. Once again, the 2048 QAM, up to 1 gig in a single box. Next slide. We have the 820C. This is a dual core radio, approximately 2 gig in a box. It can support 1+0, 2+0. A lot of our customers set it up in a 2+2 configuration to be able to provide redundancy of the system. A very reliable radio, very high MTBF. Once again, very, very small. Next slide, Colin. And the biggest thing about this radio, once again, for reverse auction, it's all based on lower cost of ownership. More capacity in a single core, smaller antennas mean that you have less power consumption. You have smaller antennas, which means less lease space. Everything that goes into, once again, helping you craft a successful reverse auction bid, we've tried to design into this radio so that if you use it to get access to an area that you may not have fiber in or right now, then the PTP 820 gives you an excellent cost-efficient option for that. Next slide. Our middle mile radio, our point-to-point 650 radio, once again, sub-6 gigahertz capacity, works in a 5.1, 5.4, 5.8 range, integrated. You can see it's very small if you use the integrated antenna. Once again, if you want to lease space, it's very small profile. If you have to lease space to put a 650 in, an application for that could be one of the high bandwidth applications that Ted talked about, or it could be providing backhaul to an IP DSLAM if you want to use a wireline based system. Next slide, Colin. The 650 will give you 450 meg. Once again, very small package, highly reliable radio. It can go a long way. You can see up to 124 mile range. It's an Ethernet radio. We also have TDM drops off of it if you want to do that. Next slide. 10 per hertz spectral efficiency. Once again, we see application like this in some of our telco customers where they're actually feeding, the most expensive piece of getting to a remote customer is not the equipment that connects to the customer in some cases, but it's the laying of the fiber or the backhaul associated with taking that DSLAM deeper and deeper into the network. The 650 is a near line of sight radio. That means you don't have to have clear line of sight. You don't have to put it on a 150-foot tower. We've had customers that mount them on the top of a 60-foot wooden pole to be able to get out there. As a matter of fact, we have a customer on the line right now that's the 650 from pole to pole to pole that's driving their bandwidth deeper and deeper into the network utilizing solely wooden poles. Next slide. One thing about the 650 before I go on that, the 650 also has a feature called DSO. A lot of customers are kind of leery about using an unlicensed radio for backhaul. The 650 has a feature in it called digital signal optimization, digital spectrum optimization. If you set that up in a particular channel band in a spectrum and somebody bursts into your channel, the 650 surveys the entire band time there, and if somebody bursts into your band for whatever region, the 650 will actually switch to a cleaner channel to make sure that your transmission is always the best that it can be. So it is the best insurance policy that you can get for an unlicensed near line of sight radio for delivering high bandwidth services. So if you have the long haul in place, or you need a long haul or middle mile, we have the PTP products for the 650 and the 820. One of the things that's most important that I think will be a major factor in how you craft your bid is how you connect to your customers. And that's the last mile or our point to multi-point products that we have available. There's been a lot of evolution of those products over a period of time, capacity, density, size. We'll talk a little bit about those. Colin, if you want to go to the next slide. We have two different options for you. Once again, depending on how you want to craft your bid, if cost isn't, a few things. Ted said there's a number of things that you need to look at, spectrum availability and different things. We have two different options for you. We have our PTP 450, which is our backhaul cornerstone product. We've got over 3 million nodes of this deployed throughout the world right now. We have our ePMP product. ePMP, it provides a lot of the same features of the PMP 450 at a less expensive price. It's only offered in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz frequencies, whereas the 450 is offered in a number of additional frequencies that you can get. Once again, spectral availability is really key for this. Next slide, Colin. The 450 product that we have, the 450i product, provides 125 megabits of bandwidth out of a given access point. So that means in a 360-degree array, you can get greater gigabits worth of bandwidth available that you can go up to, we've got some customers that are going 15, 20 miles with it. That's not the norm. probably 5 miles is relatively safe. It'll support any symmetrical or asymmetrical speed. You can set that up as you want. The most important thing, and probably the biggest differentiator of the 450, is the GPS syncing capability. That is a feature in the product Cambium developed that reduces interference and also makes sure that your network is as clean as it can possibly be when you're utilizing point-to-multipoint products. Next slide. I apologize for going so fast. I want to be cognizant of your time here. You can see a little bit of information here on the 450, 900 megahertz, 2435, 365, 5154, 58 gigahertz frequencies. Depending on how you configure it, it can operate and provide either 125 meg or up to 450 meg. In an access point, our new massive MIMO platform, 14 by 14 MIMO, the first and most advanced product on the market today. If you're serving a dense area, the MIMO product will give you 450 meg out of an per sector out of an access point, all in a 20 megahertz channel, so you can be as spectrally efficient as you possibly can. It's actually the most spectrally efficient radio on the market. It provides 3 to 5 milliseconds worth of latency. You saw in Ted's slides, one of the most critical requirements of any sort of device utilized for CAF2 is the latency issue of it. All of our products, whether it be unlicensed point-to-point, licensed point-to-point, or unlicensed point-to-multipoint, is very spectrally efficient and very low latency product. Next slide, Colin. As you know, if you're familiar with wireless at all, you need an access point located on a high vertical asset, like Ted was talking about, American Tower, and then you put a subscriber module on the customer home. You can utilize this technology, once again, depending on which model that you put in, either 125 meg per access point or 450 meg per access point, and you can drop, depending on your depending on design, 60, 70, even greater meg worth of capacity on each customer house. Next, Colin. Very important here that I need to bring this up. The 900 megahertz radio for the PNP 450, 900 megahertz, the lower the frequency, the greater the propagation of a radio. And the 900 megahertz, we introduced that about a year ago. 900 megahertz, if you have those hard to reach customers that are in very rural areas that are surrounded by trees and that sort of thing that you typically can't get access to, even utilizing unlicensed radios, the 900 megahertz system will burn right through trees. So tree coverage and obstacles like that have been real tough to deal with wireless is now no longer an obstacle with the 900 megahertz system. In some cases, we see customers that'll put a 5.8 access point on a tower and reach the customers that are easily accessible. Right below that on the tower, they'll put a 900 megahertz system, and they'll use that solely to reach out and get those really hard customers that they can't get with a 5.8 or a 365 radio. So when you're talking about rural areas, hard to reach, sparsely populated areas, the 900 megahertz is a great option for you to be able to reach out and get those customers. Colin, next slide, please. Our EPMP, once again, a very feature-rich point-to-multipoint system. It's this 802.11n system on a chip. We've also put a lot of Cambium customization into that as well. Lower cost system, once again, available in fewer frequencies, not quite as robust as the PNP 450, but it does a great job at providing high-speed broadband to rural customers. Colin? Interestingly enough, with the EPMP, it can be used as a point-to-multipoint system, or it can be used as a point-to-point system. So if you have a rural design where you want to get from one place to another very inexpensively, you can actually utilize the EPMP as a point-to-point radio feeding a series of access points that are acting as point-to-multipoint. Very important, once again, when you're looking at being able to craft a reverse auction bid where you have a ceiling that you need to stay below and being able to submit this bid. We have a number of options for you and utilizing either the PMP 450 or the EPMP, either as a point-to-point or a point-to-multipoint product. Next slide, Colin. Specs on the EPMP, as we talked about before, it operates in the 5 gig frequency, the 2.4 gig frequency. Maximum throughput on a 40 meg channel for an EPMP is 200 meg per sector. So if you put in 4 sectors of that going into 360 degree, you're looking at 800 meg worth of capacity radiating out at about the same distances that we saw with the PMP 450. Next, Colin. Once again, I apologize for talking fast on this. If you're looking at utilizing fixed wireless broadband for your reverse auction, we have a number of planning tools that can help you out to determine whether this works for you. Once again, Ted talked a lot about looking at your network, engineering your network in advance, making sure that you can do what it is that you want to do. Next slide, Colin. We have a free tool called Link Planner that you can download from our website, and it will give you, all you have to do is know the locations that you want to hit, either from a point-to-point or a point-to-multipoint location, and you can put that in, just program those numbers in, where the addresses are, the lat lons, or whatever it is that you want to do, and then the heights of where the radios are going to be, and Link Planner will come back to you immediately and tell you what your capacity is going to be, what your availability is going to be, everything about the link. So if you're looking at an area you want to be able to serve, Link Planner is a free tool from Cambium that you can download and understand exactly what it is that you can and can't do with fixed wireless broadband for your area. Next slide. It does point-to-multipoint and point-to-point. This gives you an idea, kind of an idea of engineering an area utilizing point-to-multipoint using Link Planner. You put it at the location you want the access points to be, and then the Link Planner will give you a heat map telling you what kind of coverage that you're going to get in a given area with your point-to-multipoint system. Next slide. Just kind of an example here, we also have return on investment tools. We have customers that say, okay, if I'm going to put this in, what kind of a return on investment I'm going to get? It's probably not as clean for a reverse auction, but it gives you a really good idea from a financial standpoint as to what you can do. We will design a network for you, and once we design that network for you, next slide, we have a return on investment template that we've built that utilizes the equipment that we've built in the engineering model, and also allows you to put your own numbers in. This is what your costs are going to be. It's not a vendor cost basis. You can utilize your own cost in to give yourselves an idea as to what this is ultimately going to provide and what your payback is going to be. Those tools are available for anyone. We'll be happy to work with anyone on if I'm going to build a network, what's my ROI going to be in building this network. Just let us know and we'll help you out. Next slide. Once again, I apologize for being so quick here. I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you for getting on this. I hope you found this educational. We wanted to provide you the tools. This is a very exciting opportunity for a lot of carriers in the network today to get up to $215 million a year in funding, and we want to provide you the tools to be able to craft a winning bid. So what we wanted to do was introduce you to a gentleman that can help you build your bid. If you're new to wireless and don't have any vertical assets, we wanted to introduce you to American Tower so they can help you find assets in your territory. And obviously from us, we want to provide you the tools to be able to reach out and get those customers. Once again, a number of customers bid our products in the rural broadband experiment. They won money. We believe that our products offer the technical capabilities that meets all the criteria of the reverse auction and CAF in general, and also particularly for the reverse auction gives you a cost profile necessary to be able to submit a winning bid. So thank you very much once again for all your time. If you have any questions, please submit them to us. We will get back to you promptly with the answers to all the questions. I apologize. We've gone long on this. We wanted to keep it to an hour, but we want to thank everybody for dialing in, and we appreciate your time. And all three of us on the call stand ready to help you in any way that we can. Thank you very much.